The Philadelphia Eagles win streak finally ends at 10 games. Jalen Hurts was knocked out of the game early in the first quarter. The Eagles defense gave up more than 20 points for the first time since the bye week, and the playoff standings are coming much closer into view. Welcome to the Philly Film Room podcast. I am Nick Waters, and today we finally have to talk about an Eagles loss. And we get to see what life is like without Jalen Hurts. For the past couple of weeks, Jalen had taken a lot of criticism, saying that he was the guy holding this team back, when in reality, there's a lot of things that Jalen Hurts does really well, and he's a big reason why this team got to where they got. You don't get to 10 wins in a row without your quarterback playing a big part in it. And so we got to see what Jalen Hurts brings and what this team is missing without Jalen Hurts. We also got to finally see this defense get tested, and I guess finally getting tested isn't really the right wording, but for many of the games that they've played, the opposing offenses have been kind of timid and scared to push the ball down the field. The Washington Commanders in their second match against this Eagles defense were much more aggressive and willing to push the ball down the field. So for that reason, I think these DBs and the secondary got tested much more than we've seen in previous games. But after this victory by the Commanders, they are now the most likely opponent for the Eagles to play in the first round. The Packers are the second most likely. And the Eagles really do need to win against the Cowboys so that they can rest starters in week 18. We don't want this to be a scenario where they come out and they lose to the Cowboys and then have to go and take care of business in the last week. They're probably not getting the 1 seed. So let's get a rest wherever we can. Let's hopefully take care of business against the Cowboys this week. And this Cowboys team, they've put up a good fight since they played the Eagles. They've put up a good fight against a number of teams. They beat the Commanders, first of all. They took the Bengals to the wire. And then in this previous week, we saw them get a victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were in first place in their division at the time. But having said that, let's jump into this game review. And we're going to start first with the defense. The defense gave up 36 points, which was their most of the season. They also gave up 368 yards, which was their fourth most this season. And they gave up 5.8 yards per play, which was actually 19th on the week. So it's not like they had this horrible performance overall. On a per play basis, the defense really overall wasn't that bad, but there was really just a few key plays that led to the big yardage total. Number one, we had the 49-yard touchdown to Olamide Zaccheaus, where they had 12 men on the field. It was a busted coverage, and you had Zaccheaus break a couple tackles on his way to the end zone on a wide open play. Now, this was a mix of events leading up to that play. You had Darius Slay go down a few plays earlier. Isaiah Rodgers stepped in, had a couple nice plays in his place, but he also got hurt. And then they put in Kelee Ringo. But it looked like Darius Slay was ready to come back on the field, but there was some miscommunication at some point. You see Kelee Ringo on the field, Darius Slay running off late. And at that point in time, Ringo was covering a guy that he shouldn't have been covering. There was no deep defender on that side of the field, and you get a wide open touchdown. You also got a 51-yard pass to Dyami Brown on a play where Darius Slay was running with the go route. He turned his head back to look for the ball and drifted too far inside. And then you had the 32-yard touchdown pass to Terry McLaurin against Quinyon Mitchell in coverage. It was just a play where Quinyon opened up the gate too early, just gave a free release to the receiver, and he wasn't even in the screen on the replay on the replay of Terry McLaurin catching that pass. He pretty much got dusted on that play. And to be fair, we've talked about it in previous podcasts. Teams really haven't been challenging Quinyon for a good reason. He's in good position a lot, but there have been times where guys have been open, but teams just aren't really looking to throw his way. And part of that has to do with scheme, knowing that there's easier matchups elsewhere than going at Quinyon Mitchell. You just aren't seeing that many teams target Quinyon. But when we saw a team, and especially teams that were going to play this Eagles team again, we talked about they're probably going to take more shots at Quinyon because while he has been good very much for the most part in coverage, there have been times and ways that you can take advantage of Quinyon. But there was 132 yards off of uncharacteristic plays. And those are plays that I'm not overly concerned with because we haven't seen those plays a ton throughout the season. If this was something where they were giving up these plays left and right pretty much every game of the season, then this would be a concern. But it's one game and a couple of plays and a very large sample size where they haven't been giving up these kind of plays. The defense also had 5 turnovers. And again, on a play-by-play basis, they had a fine day against a team that ranks top 5 in many statistics on offense. Their success rate per play was actually better than their Week 11 matchup, which should go to show that It was a lot of big plays that they were giving up, but on a down and down basis, they were pretty good. It really came down to a few key plays, which we talked about a little bit, and some situational moments. We saw a lot of good reps in coverage. We saw them passing off and leveraging routes very well for the most part. We saw them getting into throwing windows, and we saw a few pass breakups that ultimately ended up in an interception. We saw another interception on an overthrown pass to CJ GJ as well. The run defense was very stout against running backs. They gave up 32 yards on 15 carries. That's 2.1 yards per carry. Now, the key issues was number one, Daniels willing to push the ball downfield, right? Is this going to be an area where they continue to be exposed? I don't think so, but I do think teams are going to be more aggressive. You can't really sit here and try and dink and dunk against this Eagles defense and expect to put up points. So I do think we're going to see teams be more aggressive. Now, that's going to be on the Eagles defenders to step up and put themselves in positions to make plays on the ball. So hopefully when that happens, when Quinyon continues to get tested, hopefully he is able to get a turnover here and there. Slay has been very good in coverage overall. I'm not too worried again, but we did see Daniels willing to push the ball down the field. Now, when we look at their third and fourth down defense, that was an issue in this game. The Washington Commanders were sixth best on third down offense coming into the game. They were the best team in the NFL on fourth down overall. And in this game, they were 7 of 13 on third down, which is above their season average in terms of their percentage of conversions on third down. And they were 2 for 3 on fourth down. So the Eagles got them into situations where they had to convert on third down, and even fourth downs, the Commanders were converting. The next time they play this team, which may very well be in the first round of the playoffs, it may be next year, but the next time they play a Jaden Daniels-led team, they need to be much better on third down getting off the field. They also struggled in red zone defense. The Commanders were 3 of 4 in the red zone, and they were the 7th best red zone offense coming into the game. They also needed to do a better job of keeping Jaden Daniels in the pocket. Both fourth down conversions that they had were due to scrambles. That included a 29-yard gain on 4th and 11. They also had a 3rd and 7 conversion on a quarterback trap play. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The red zone defense in specific, teams have been intentionally targeting CJ in the red zone, and he has 7 touchdowns allowed this season. 6 of those have been in the red zone, and in specific, the low red zone area, so about the 15 to 5-yard line, and then the goal line area, so anything below the 5-yard line. Teams have really been targeting CJ in that area. The first touchdown of the game came as a result of CJ trying to switch off a route with Cooper DeJean and man coverage. Cooper recognized that he needed to switch the route off and took the guy to the flat, and CJ just didn't recognize that, and he ultimately lost the receiver, and it was a pretty easy touchdown. I think that's something that teams have seen on film, that we've talked about it, his eye discipline can be lacking at times. He can get his eyes back to the quarterback too much. And I think teams are trying to take advantage of that, specifically here by running these concepts where you have the number 2 and number 3 receivers switching places, right? Getting switch releases. And then if you have bad eye discipline, in those times, bad communication, it is much easier for teams to get some busted coverages that way. I think that's been an issue this year. When you look at the red zone touchdown that they threw against Tristan McCollum after CJ ended up getting kicked out of the game, and I guess I'll take a minute to pause and talk about that CJ play getting kicked out. The first play, the first time that he got a penalty, he was taunting. I don't know what was said. He must have had some vintage Mike Tyson comments in that interaction to where it's warranted, where he gets punched in the face and the ref throws a penalty on him. I can only imagine what was said. Having said that, there is a time and a place. There are certain things you can't say on the field, right? You also can't wind up and punch a dude in the face. So at best, it should have been offsetting penalties. You still get the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. So a second one in the game gets you thrown out. Now, once you have that second penalty in the game, you have to be cognizant and be aware of what's going on and understanding that if the ref is going to be that, what's the word for it? I guess that soft with what he's letting be said on the field, then you need to internalize that and understand this might not be the game, especially when I already have one unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. You got to be a little cautious with what you're going to say. It's very similar to a game where if early in the game they're letting you get away with pass interference and being physical on receivers, well, you know you can probably be physical throughout the rest of the game. But if they're being tight and throwing ticky-tack flags on just incidental or minor contact, then you know it's probably going to be a game where you can't be as aggressive in coverage, right? Very similar principle to a situation where the ref is being quick on the trigger to throw a penalty because of some words you might have said. So CJ just got to be smarter in that situation. It's a great learning moment for the team and for the player. Hopefully, CJ runs hot. He's an emotional player. Hopefully, he doesn't let that become an issue in future games. And once it happens once, these refs talk, they see what happens in other games. This is going to be something that they keep an eye on. But having said that, when Tristan McCollum came into the game, the Commanders ran another concept that was probably designed to go after CJ. And that same situation was the same side of the field, almost same formation. It might have been, there was 3 receivers to that side of the field. I don't remember if it was empty or not. I don't think it was empty, but I'm pretty sure it was a play that they had designed all week and put in the game plan to target and go after CJ. It's just that Tristan McCollum was in the game now, right? It was a good play to attack either cover 1 or their red zone quarters coverage. The Eagles played quarters on this play. And it was another situation where you get a split release. And what Tristan really needed to do right there was keep his outside leverage. He had low and inside help from Nakobe Dean. You're supposed to be playing with outside leverage. When that switch release happened, Tristan McCollum's eyes got stuck in the backfield. I think he just got confused on who he's supposed to guard. And then he lets up a wide open touchdown on a corner route to the receiver. And it's unfortunate because of the fact that the pass was inaccurate, is left behind the receiver. If he played with better eye discipline and better leverage from the beginning, then he probably would have gotten in position to make a play on the ball, potentially intercept the pass, but that didn't happen. And the thing is, the CJ got beat on a touchdown on a very similar concept, very same coverage that the Eagles are running in this game on this play was the same coverage they were running on the Pat Freiermuth touchdown last week against the Steelers. And the same exact thing happened. Well, I shouldn't say same exact thing happened. CJ played with better eye discipline, but he didn't play and maintain his outside leverage from the get-go. And because of that, he gave up a touchdown on that play. Now, it was a much more wide open play when Tristan McCollum was in the game. And that's just, again, when you got young backups in the game, these are the things that happen. Tristan's got the ability talent-wise, but he's played very little football at the NFL level. When backups come into the game with little experience, you just should expect that they're going to get targeted and they're going to give up some plays. But hopefully he learns from that moment and continues growing. I know a number of people are going to say, well, the Eagles struggled this game because CJ was out, because Jalen was out, because Sweat missed a good portion of the game. Jordan Davis missed a good portion of the game. Both those guys ended up coming back in the game later. Nakobe Dean went down for a play. But the thing is, that very well could happen in the playoffs. We like to say, oh, well, next time we play this team, that's not going to happen. Jalen probably won't get hurt in the next game. All those guys probably won't get hurt in the next game, but 1 or 2 of those guys might get hurt, and then you have your backups in the game. Those backups need to be ready to go. They need to be able to play their coverages so you don't have some of these issues come up during the game. But let's get back to what we were talking about. Looking at the game-winning touchdown, again, another red zone play where they really, this was a great play by the Commanders to attack the Eagles' quarters coverage again. They knew exactly what player that they were going to get when they came out in empty, and they ran they ran a play to take advantage of exactly the coverage that they were seeing. The play in question was designed to take advantage of the natural outside leverage of the safety against the number 3 receiver. If you want a little bit more details about the play, check out my latest video I did on Devontae Smith and his touchdowns that he scored off of essentially one play, just run with a couple of different variations. We talked about this play on the last play that we broke down, how you can attack quarters coverage and the red zone by running this post route from the number 3 receiver. And that's exactly what the Commanders did on this play. A play that the Eagles scored a touchdown on against the Falcons, exact same thing that the Commanders did to the Eagles. Although I would say their design was probably a little bit better, because what this play did was it took advantage of both, or really 3 players, of Reed Blankenship playing outside leverage on the number 3 receiver. It took advantage of the natural outside leverage of Cooper DeJean guarding the number 2 receiver and the slot. And then it put the middle linebacker in conflict. Zach Bond was in conflict. Bond on these red zone plays, what is supposed to happen on this coverage in the red zone is Bond is supposed to carry the number 3 receiver on anything vertical, get underneath and carry and post up under that receiver on anything vertical until he sees an under route come back into the zone. So for that reason, you see Zach Bond's eyes. He's carrying with his body. He's carrying the number 3 receiver. But with his eyes, you can see him staring at the number 2 receiver. When that number 2 receiver breaks underneath, he then rotates to come back down underneath, and then he gives up space for the receiver to catch a touchdown, right? So number one is just good play design. It puts the linebacker in conflict. But you also get a situation where Reed Blankenship probably backpedaled a little bit too much, being in the red zone, knowing you have the end zone for help, the back of the end zone for help. Probably got a little bit too much depth in his coverage. He could have been a little bit tighter, and then he took a bad angle to the ball. Having said that, I don't think he's stopping that play regardless. It is a play designed to take advantage of that exact coverage, right? So it's just a coverage beater. Having said that, DeJean wasn't very sticky in coverage as well on the under route. He flipped his hips a little bit too early. If he had stayed square better instead of flipping his hips early, probably would have been in better position to connect on the under route at the top of the break. But again, those routes were designed specifically to beat this coverage. The Commanders knew exactly what they were going to get when they came out in empty and the red zone. The Eagles will need to be better at either disguising the coverage or running a different coverage and empty the next time that they see the Commanders, and really probably the next time that they see an opponent in the playoffs, because teams see what other teams were successful with, what plays that they were successful with, and they will absolutely copy and implement some of those plays to take advantage of coverages. So that will need to get cleaned up. But looking at some of their third down and fourth down defense, because that was an issue as well. The touchdowns against CJ, Quinyon, and McCollum were all that we talked about, were all third down plays as well. Jaden Daniels was really killing them on third down and fourth down with his legs, whether it was scrambling or designed runs. One was a designed rollout, which is a tough play to stop with the offensive line moving. It was also a good play by Daniels to find space. The coverage had blanketed everyone on the back end. But when you get the front moving like that, it's really hard to maintain your gap lane integrity at that point in time. Now, 2 of the big runs were a result of the Eagles and their wide front. What I mean by that is they spread their defensive line out on third down and fourth down. The reason being is because when you get wide nines with your defensive ends, and then you spread your defensive tackles out to really align on the inside shade of the offensive tackles, you're trying to get your pass rushers one-on-one matchups and make it a little easier to attack the passer, right? But what that does is it makes the middle of the defense wide open, and you saw the Commanders try and take advantage of that. One of the plays, it was a design play. You knew that this was game planned into their game this week, right? Because they checked into it. You could hear Jaden Daniels calling Remington. And then what they did is they ran a quarterback trap where they had an offensive lineman come and kick out one of the interior defensive linemen and open up a huge lane up the middle. You saw another play later in the game was a fourth down conversion. They come out in their wide front again. The Eagles did. The center comes over and knocks Jalen Carter further out of the way. In the future, I imagine we are probably going to see if they play the Commanders again, or if they play a rushing team again like this, a team with a quarterback that can run like Jaden Daniels, I should say. I'd imagine they're probably not going to come out in the same front again, or if they do, they're probably going to use some type of stunt or twist to make sure that they keep a presence on the interior there, right? Put a defensive lineman on the A gap, one of the A gaps. They're more likely to get double teamed, and there's going to need to be a conversation that's had, right? When you are the guy that is getting double teamed as a defensive tackle, unless you get a quick win against that double team right away, you need to understand against these rushing and mobile quarterbacks that you probably need to sit there and make sure you're more of a contained player, right? The other defensive tackle that has the one-on-one, they have a two-way go. They need to be the one that wins their one-on-one matchup. But you as a guy that's taking on the double team, oftentimes you'll see these guys sit back and hang out and wait for the quarterback to break the pocket and scramble. And oftentimes if that other defensive tackle takes the inside path and they get pushed too far to the inside of the quarterback, well, then that defensive tackle that is taking on the double team can loop back around and make the one-on-one defensive tackle correct in their pass rush, right? So rushing as a unit is huge. It is extremely important to make sure you are keeping quarterbacks contained. Here's the thing. After that fourth down conversion where Jaden Daniels got like 29 yards on a scramble, The Eagles started running a lot more blitzes and a lot more stunts. I think this was likely an effort to keep Daniels in the pocket. When you have five guys rushing the passer, it's just easier to maintain your rush lane integrity. Doesn't always happen, but it is a little bit easier to have when you have more guys coming on the front to keep the quarterback in a box, right? But also when you run a stunt, you can present an open gap, hopefully get the quarterback to step up into it, and then you bring another defensive lineman around, hopefully unblocked, to clean up on the quarterback. The Eagles got this on the final drive of the game, but Jaden Daniels made Jalen Carter miss. I will say in the future, I would try and keep and stay away from those wide fronts against the Commanders and against Jaden Daniels, or against if they were to play Lamar Jackson in the Super Bowl or Josh Allen in the Super Bowl, or quarterback like that. Stay away from those fronts. Try and keep a defender lined up in the A gap between the guard and the center. But I would also try and run more man coverage with a spy. They were running when they were blitzing. When they weren't sending sem pressure, because they send a lot of sem pressures where they'd blitz a guy and then drop a guy into coverage, right? I'm not talking about those plays. When they were blitzing five, it by and large was man coverage that they were running behind those 5-man pressures, right? Instead of sending a guy in to blitz and try and contain Jaden Daniels at that point in time, I would much rather that player be a spy player. Then you have a guy you can still try and keep contained with your 4 up front. When Jaden Daniels does break contain, then you have a more athletic guy than a guy like Jalen Carter trying to slow down Jaden Daniels in space, right? But it also allows you to keep, that spy player can still be a presence in the low middle of the field for the rest of your defenders that are playing man coverage. We've talked about it on previous podcasts. I'm not a fan of running 5-man blitzes with man coverage behind it on 3rd and medium or 3rd and long. It just makes it much harder for those defenders in man coverage to funnel their receivers to help defender on the inside, right? So because of that, it's just much harder to play man coverage on the back end. We saw the Commanders get a 3rd down conversion on a play where they sent a blitz and there was no middle defender to help with the safety on a running back releasing over the middle. There was a lot of traffic for the safety to run through. So for that reason, I'm just not a huge fan of running a ton of man coverage with a blitz attached to it. Now, they still got stops on 3rd down, including an interception and a pass breakup. They need to be better in the red zone, and they need to be more vigilant keeping Jaden Daniels contained in the pocket. But I would also like to see a little bit more in the next matchup, more spot drop cover 3 versus cover 3 match. You saw the Eagles using a lot of cover 3 match in this game. They use a lot more spot drop cover 3 in their first matchup. Talked about it in the past. Cover 3 match often ends up playing out like cover 1, but you're not dedicating a spy player. So it's really up to your front to contain Lamar. And you still get this same issue that happens oftentimes when you're playing cover 6 or quarters or cover 8, any of their split field coverages, right? When you are trying to match the release of receivers, that takes eyes off of the quarterback and allows more lanes to scramble. Now, having said that, when you run spot drop cover 3, it is a softer version of zone coverage. It does give up easier completions underneath. So there's that give and take on what you want to do. Mixing and matching those coverages is probably the best bet, but they use a lot of cover 3 match in this game, and that just gives the quarterback a good opportunity to step up and to scramble. I also hope to see that we get more creative ways to get Jalen Carter matched up with Tyler Biadasz at center. Sam Cosmi, now 2 games in a row, has held his own very well one-on-one with Jalen Carter, at least in pass protection. In the run game, he's given him fits, but in pass pro, Jalen Carter has struggled a bit with Sam Cosmi. Cosmi has really gotten his hands on to Carter quick, and it's pretty funny to watch, and he's not the only guy that this has happened with. We talked about it in previous episodes. This has become a thing where offensive linemen are getting their hands on Jalen Carter quickly. They're not getting depth and allowing him a lot of space to rush. It's a lot of quick sets, getting their hands on Jalen Carter quickly, and then it looks like, to me, it looks like the offensive lineman is like riding a mechanical bull, just trying to hang on for dear life. But these good offensive linemen, they're able to maintain their posture, their balance and their composure and slow down Jalen Carter when they get their hands on him quickly. When you look at the other side of the line, Milton Williams is doing an excellent job setting up pass rushers with stutter steps and jab steps to draw the hands, and then using tight hands to fight the offensive lineman's hands and keep them off of his body. Jalen Carter, he is using a lot of wind-ups. He's winding up a good amount to generate more power on his club moves, and it's just allowing the offensive linemen to get into his chest a little bit too easily. Now, we can't talk about this game without talking about field position. That definitely played a part in this game, but I don't think it was as big of an issue that initially it was being made out to be, because when you look at the fact of the Commanders still had touchdowns of 96 and 87 yards, so they were still driving down the field, but the Eagles had good field position as well due to the number of turnovers that they were able to get in this game. But we obviously can't expect the team to get 5 turnovers in a game like we saw in this game. But for what it's worth, the Commanders had 4 drives started on their own 40-yard line or better. They did have another one that started at their own 39-yard line. The Eagles had 5 drives where they started on the Commanders on their own 40-yard line or better, so on the Commanders' side of the field. Field position wasn't as big of a deal as most made, but I will say this. The kickoff unit wasn't good, and I don't know why I think they wanted to challenge, and I think they had a game plan thinking they could pin the Commanders deep by kicking it to them. The cold could have affected how far the ball was traveling. The ball definitely does not travel as far in cold weather. Hot and humid weather, the ball tends to travel better. People in baseball know this. When you get hot and humid conditions, the ball tends to travel further. When you get the cold conditions, the ball is harder. There's more friction in the air. It's harder for the ball to travel as far. But having said that, I do think this was a game where they were trying to kick it short, force them to return, and try and pin them deep. They, for the most part, kept trying to corner kick it to one side of the field, but their unit just wasn't good. And when we look at the Eagles kickoff unit, they ranked 24th in yards per return. The Commanders were 8th best in kickoff yards per return. So I don't know why that was the game plan coming into this game. Hopefully they don't continue to do that. And overall, despite the 36 points they gave up, I'm not overly concerned with this defense. There were uncharacteristic plays for sure, but we have a much bigger sample size of this defense being good than bad. So I'll lean on that. The run defense was stout. They were able to get several unblocked pressures as well from Fangio's pressure packages that he used, mainly from their sim pressures that they used. They did have 5 turnovers, but they do need to clean up the quarterback contain issues that had been an issue coming into this game especially in the Ravens and in the Panthers game. They do need to spend extra time cleaning up some of their red zone issues as well, coming up with just some different adjustments that they can do so that they're a little bit better. Obviously, they need to figure out what's going on with CJ in the red zone, because he has given up a lot of different touchdowns in a number of different ways, whether it's been man coverage, whether it's been zone, rub routes, whatnot, what have you. But they were the 4th best red zone defense coming into the game, so hopefully it's just more of a one-game anomaly than anything else. But before we move on, I will say this one last point. It is very likely that the Eagles were going to play the Commanders in the first round, even coming into this game, right? So I don't think the Eagles were coming out and wanted to show everything that they could do. I imagine they're going to have some designer coverages, some different things that they're going to do against the Commanders if they do play them again in the first round of the playoffs. But that remains to be seen. What this game really came down to was touchdowns versus field goals. The Commanders had 5 touchdowns to 0 field goals, while the Eagles had 3 touchdowns to 4 field goals. So the Eagles scored more times, but they just scored field goals to touchdowns as opposed to the Commanders getting those touchdowns. Having said that, let's look at what the offense was doing and the result for them only having 4 field goals as opposed to the Commanders' 5 touchdowns, right? The offense was rolling early with Jalen, though much of it was Jalen on the ground. He was 1 for 4 passing. He had 2 scrambles and the quarterback draw that resulted in him being knocked out. This really turned into the Kenny Pickett game. And Pickett had some bad plays, naturally. I mean, he is a backup quarterback, and we're going to talk about the world of backup quarterbacks in a little bit, but there's no way to sugarcoat it. He had a bad game and a number of facets of the football game. He was inaccurate on a handful of passes that allowed defenders to make plays on the ball. Yeah, the interception on a play where he had the right initial read, but pulled the trigger too quickly. The defender made a really good play as well. What he's reading is the body language and the shoulders of the flat defender. Initially, he looked like he was flying out to the flat, but then he pivoted, flipped his hips back around, and got into the throwing window. It was a really good play by the defender. So you got to shake their hand as well sometimes. But that was a play where Pickett probably was just a hair too quick making his decision. If he had just waited a second longer, he would have gotten to the rest of the progression. But I do understand why he went to take that throw right away. Initially, it looked like the defender was moving out to the flat, and most times he probably would have been right on that play, and he would have gotten the ball out of his hands quick and on time, but it was probably just a little bit too quick there. Now, he did take a sack on a second down where he probably should have gotten the ball out quicker. It led to a 3rd and long, which they ended up not converting. He bailed the pocket on his second quarter 3rd down where they were running a cover 2 beater against the Commanders, who had rotated into cover 2. There was a dig route by AJ coming across the middle. I actually highlighted this as a play that I would run on Twitter, knowing that the Commanders run a lot of cover 2, and this was really one of the main ways that the Eagles try and generate explosive plays against cover 2. He also took a sack on a cover 0 in the red zone where he probably should have kept Saquon in to block and for protection, or he should have got him out into a hot route at that point in time. But overall, I do think he did a lot of things to put the team in position to win. There was a lot of bad, but there was also a lot of good as well. Some of that included getting the team into the right place. So when we saw Saquon's 68-yard touchdown, we saw Kenny Pickett check into a counter run where the guard and the H-back were pulling across the line of scrimmage. The Commanders were in their 6-1 front. When you get teams that are in 6-1 fronts, when they get a lot of linemen on the line of scrimmage, and then you pull multiple players to the opposite side of the ball, that makes it really hard for the defense to fit into the run and get the run fits correct at that point in time. And the Commanders didn't do a good job of fitting the run, and that's why you saw Saquon Barkley go untouched for 68 yards. It was really good execution by the offensive linemen and the tight ends as well, and block. And also we got a really good block by, I believe it was AJ Brown, a crack block on a safety. So good execution top to bottom. He also stepped in cold off the bench and finished off a touchdown drive that Jalen had started, right? That's not easy to do. It was a cold conditions. You haven't been throwing the ball. You're probably a little tight first coming into the game. He came in, 3 completions in a row, threw for a touchdown to finish off that drive. He was also willing to throw aggressively to AJ Brown, which resulted in big plays and resulted in 3 defensive pass interferences that helped move the team down the field. I would say he was about even, good to bad on 3rd downs. There was 2 3rd and 14 plus plays. I don't expect him to complete those. Now there was a 2nd and 8 play where he took a sack that got him into 3rd and 14. But there was also a play where AJ ran his route short of the sticks on 3rd and 5. He was 3 for 3 on 4th down conversions, including big conversions at the end of the game. There was also a conversion to set up the Eagles to attempt a field goal at the end of the half. This game could have been different if Jake Elliott had made that field goal. I will say the cold probably played a factor into Elliott coming up short on that field goal. Again, the ball doesn't travel as far when it is cold. But Pickett, getting back to Pickett, he was quick and decisive on many plays. That's something that we talked about in the quarterback preview coming into this season. Pickett's issues, I thought, were more to do with being inaccurate. I thought he was fairly good at getting through his reads and getting the ball out on time. It's just he is overall a pretty inaccurate quarterback. But I thought he's quick and decisive on many plays. We saw some good movement in the pocket. We saw some plays where he was able to extend the play with his legs, and he had the team in position to win the game, right? And that was in a game where they really, really struggled to run the ball. We'll talk about the run game in a little bit, but he put the team in position. He was a Devontae Smith drop away from sealing this game and beating Jaden Daniels on the road, right? Was he perfect? No, but welcome to the world of backup quarterbacks. And especially with very little practice reps, there's not a whole lot that you can truly, you can't come in expecting that a backup quarterback getting almost no reps in practice, because that's what happens during the regular season. A lot of the reps goes to the first team quarterback. You can't really expect that these quarterbacks are going to come in and light the world on fire. So if you're expecting that he was going to come in and play like Jalen Hurts, that's just not going to happen with backup quarterbacks. You might get some good games here or there, but by and large, backup quarterbacks are backups for a reason. A lot of people were clamoring for Tanner McKee to come in. And in some parts, in some games, Tanner McKee outperformed Kenny Pickett in the preseason when things are very vanilla. But McKee also had a pretty bad last game of preseason as well. And here's the thing, it is natural for teams and for fans. We see this fan base to fan base. They say the backup quarterback comes in, he looks like a backup quarterback. And then they say, well, it can't be worse. Let's put the third string quarterback out there. And here's the thing, we hear this all the time with professional sports. It can't be worse. It can't be worse. Yes, it can be worse. If they put me or you out there at quarterback, they would have been much worse off. It definitely can get worse in professional sports, right? Look back to the Jets situation last year. Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, and then you have Zach Wilson step in. He didn't look good, predictably so. And then people said, well, it can't be worse. Put in the backup. And I think it was Tim Boyle. I think there might have been another backup that they used. And those guys are worse. And then they moved back to Zach Wilson. But the whole time, people are saying the Jets coaching staff has no clue what they're doing. Why are they keep putting Zach Wilson out there? And it's like, you know what? They probably have a little bit more insight than we do into why Zach Wilson kept getting put out there instead of Tim Boyle. But having said that, to me, it feels like this is probably a similar situation, right? This is now the second year in a row, second different coaching staff in terms of offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, where they've had Tanner McKee as a number 3 quarterback, right? So you also have Nick Sirianni in the offseason having end of year meetings with Howie Roseman on what they need from the GM to build this team into a Super Bowl contender. They had conversations about upgrading their number 2 quarterback. So obviously they didn't feel comfortable enough with Tanner McKee as their number 2 quarterback coming into the season. And for that reason, we see Kenny Pickett come out there. Now, maybe Tanner McKee is better. Maybe he would be a better guy to throw out there. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say it probably would be, Kenny Pickett probably is the better guy. And the coaches have a reason for going with Kenny Pickett over Tanner McKee. Now, I thought they probably should have trusted Pickett a little bit more. The run game wasn't working, number one. And then you look at their first down run pass ratio in this game. It was 73% with Pickett in the game. They ran the ball on 73% of their first downs with Kenny Pickett in the game. Now, I will say this, Pickett probably checked into some of those plays. So I don't think it was 73% called plays. Now, it might have been run option, right? Where you have one run play called, but if they come out in a different front, we want to check into a different run play. We'll never know that answer, but I do know they ran the ball in 73% of their first down runs with Kenny Pickett. And I thought they should have mixed in more play action on early downs, more screens and quick passes to Saquon as an extension of the run game, especially when they saw that their run game wasn't working. But I thought they should have trusted him a little bit more in the red zone as well. It might not have worked out either way, but in their first red zone series, after Kenny Pickett came in, threw twice in the red zone, got their second touchdown, threw for their second touchdown of the game. They ran it twice and then used Saquon as a wildcat to try and throw it to Devontae Smith. I feel like they probably should have trusted Pickett a little bit more in that situation. Would that have changed the outcome? I don't know. There was another red zone series we got to throw it twice, and it resulted in another field goal, so it might not have changed, but I do think they probably should have been a little bit more aggressive. Overall, when we look at their success rates and EPA per play on dropbacks in this game, compared with the rest of the season, this wasn't their worst day throwing the ball, right? When we look at their season averages, in terms of success rate, their season average was 47.3% success rate on dropbacks. In this game, it was 45%. EPA per play, their season average, 0.142. This game, 0.15. So was this the greatest game in the world by Kenny Pickett? No, but no quarterback is ever going to be perfect. He made a number of plays in this game to put his team in position to win. There was also a number of plays where receivers dropped passes on big plays, potential game-ending plays, right? Game-ending plays to Devontae Smith. There was it was an underthrown ball to Saquon, but on a wheel route, that was a play that Saquon should have caught and brought down for a big gain, right? But they've had worse games passing-wise. There's definitely a worse game against the Panthers, right? This wasn't all on Kenny Pickett why they lost. When we look at the run game, I thought this was by and far much more concerning than what Kenny Pickett did on film. I kind of expected that would be the Kenny Pickett we saw. You're going to see some good, you're going to see some bad. That is the world of backup quarterbacks. But I thought the run game was a bigger issue. I think part of the run game issues can be attributed to the defenses playing the run more aggressively with Kenny Pickett in at quarterback. After all, like we said, they ran the ball in 73% of their first downs, right? So the defense probably was keying in on that at some point in time. So that was partly the Eagles' own doing on offense, not trusting Kenny Pickett a little bit more on early downs. But I heard a lot of talk that defenses were kind of just ignoring Kenny Pickett on run plays, and that really wasn't the case. Every single time that they ran a zone read play, the defense honored Pickett as a potential runner and gave them the box count numbers that they needed to run the plays, right? So even though Pickett didn't carry the ball on any of those zone read plays, it was because the defense was making sure that Pickett wasn't getting the ball. They were making sure it was getting handed off to Saquon. So that really wasn't the case. They didn't really utilize zone read until the second half of the game. I thought they should have utilized it in the first half. Make the defense decide, declare. Are we going to give it to, are we going to make Kenny Pickett beat us with his legs? Or are we going to honor the fact that he can run? Pickett isn't a horrible athlete. He was in the 71st percentile in the 40-yard dash of all quarterbacks that have run that have been tested. He's also known for having a fake slide that led to a touchdown in college that ultimately changed the rules on fake sliding. So Pickett isn't a guy that is just a statue in the pocket. He's also not a guy that you can't utilize in zone read games. Obviously, he's not going to be as effective as Jalen Hurts, but you can use his threat to help give you box count numbers, and the Eagles got that in this game. Now, the Eagles also utilized pistol on 10 runs as well. It led to the 68-yard touchdown run, but after that, they had 15 yards on 6 carries for 2.5 yards a carry. I know people are saying that they should have gone more under center. They used pistol as their under center runs. They haven't been using a lot of under center and much of the games as of late, but they're using more pistol. You're going to get a lot of the same benefits and the same actions using pistol as you are going under center. The biggest issue wasn't whether they went under center or whether they were using zone read. It was more so that they just lost at the point of attack. And I think sometimes we want to say, like, it's hard for us to admit that sometimes this really good offensive line unit can have bad games. As good as they are people too, right? They have bad games. And a number of their guys had bad games. And add into it, this is the second time the Commanders have faced this team. Whenever you face a team for the second time, you are much more in tune with what they do, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. And you know who really benefited from this was Bobby Wagner. That dude was a menace all game long. He was beating guys to the punch, really. He knew, it seems like he knew what runs were coming, but he was very crafty, working around blocks and shooting gaps and disrupting runs on his own. But it wasn't just him. Lane Johnson probably had his worst game as a run blocker this season. There was a lot of plays where Lane, it hurts to say, but sometimes these guys have bad games. Lane didn't have a great game. Mekhi Becton is starting to show some of his warts. He's shown an incredible ability to torque defenders out of gaps on the first level, but defenders are starting to clue in on that. They're starting to beat him back across his face when he is trying to turn and torque them. He also struggles on the backside of cutoff blocks. He's not the most nimble of foot, so when he has to reach and chase down a guy that has him out leveraged or keep running his feet so he can keep a defender sealed, he still needs to work on that and different techniques he can use to mitigate some of his weaknesses. But in addition to that, his aiming point and technique when pulling to kick out the defender on the end of the line of scrimmage needs some work as well. So there's a number of things that he has to get better at. Cam Jurgens had some bad blocks or missed assignments in the run game overall and in pass pro as well. There's some plays. He had a really nice play where in pass protection where he was, there was a double mug look. They dropped one of the linebackers out and he gets all the way out to block a blitzing linebacker. It might have been actually Jeremy Chin blitzing as a safety all the way at the end of the line of scrimmage. But overall, I don't think he had a great game in terms of pass protection. There's a couple of times where he was unsure of who he's supposed to block and some of the Commanders' pressure packages. But really, it carried over in the run game as well. The tight ends were messing up in run blocking. They were messing up in pass protection. I don't know why they ran so much 12 and 13 personnel in this game when they had multiple practice squad tight ends having to play for them in this game with Dallas Goedert out. And it's not like Calcaterra is a plus run blocker anyways from the tight end position. So I don't know why they lived in 12 and 13 personnel. I thought they needed to get back to their 11 personnel rushing attack. Part of the issue with that is Their 11 personnel rushing attack, a lot of that is based on using the quarterback in the run game, zone read plays. You can still do some of that stuff with Kenny Pickett. They ran some RPO plays as well that ended up getting handed off. You can still do that. Nick Foles won a Super Bowl running a ton of RPOs from shotgun. Just because you're not Jalen Hurts or you're not Jaden Daniels doesn't mean you can't figure out a shotgun 11 personnel run game, right? So they started to get back to that at points in the second half, but overall, I think they needed to use more 11 personnel rushing attack. They used too much of that in the Steelers game, knowing that the Steelers were much worse against 11 personnel. They came out and they ran too much 12 and 13 personnel for my liking in that game. We saw that carry over into this game. I'm not sure why they wanted to do that. But overall, they just got beat up front, and one team brought the fight and the other got punched in the mouth. It really what the issue was. I know people want to sugarcoat and say, well, if we had Jalen this and it wasn't Kenny Pickett that, maybe that was a difference. But it's now been 2 games in a row where they haven't been the better team in the trenches and the run game. And pass pro, for the most part, I thought they were better. But in the run game, it's 2 weeks in a row that I think they've kind of got pushed around a little bit. But this team, what I think needs to do is get back to being a downhill rushing attack. There's just too much outside zone and outside zone variations, and they're not really built to do that. They're a team they're the heaviest offensive line in the NFL. They're built to maul players. Go north-south, not east-west. Inside zone, split zone, duo, gap scheme runs where you have pulling offensive linemen, but you also have on the other side the offensive linemen washing down and pushing at the point of attack, creating gaps for the running backs to run through. Those are the plays that I think they need to live in. But plays designed to get the offensive line moving east-west instead of vertically is not where I'd live with this offensive line. Now, having said that, I do think they will bounce back. I think they will have brighter days ahead of them. They still scored 33 points with Kenny Pickett at quarterback, right? Jalen only was on the field for 1.5 of those touchdowns. So I think they will bounce back. I think they will be fine, but they need to recalibrate, get back to what they've been good at in the run game. And I think that is playing downhill. Having said that, that will be it for today's episode. There's only 2 games left in the season. And like we talked about with the Eagles dropping this game, it is much more likely that the Commanders are going to be the 7th seed now. We can almost be assured that the Eagles are not going to be the 1 seed. What they really need to do is get one more win to ensure that they're the 2 seed. So they just need to beat either the Cowboys or the Giants. If they can't beat one of those 2 teams, then there's going to be bigger concerns, especially the Giants team. The Cowboys might give them a little bit more trouble than what we're expecting, especially compared to the Giants. But they definitely need to make sure they at least beat the Giants. But really, they need to come out and beat the Cowboys so that they can ensure that they get a rest week for their starters in Week 18. And yes, if Saquon has the opportunity to go for the rushing title and they have everything locked up, they're locked into the 2 seed, I still think that you rest Saquon. Records are made to be broken, but banners fly forever. There's bigger goals that this team wants to accomplish than just having one guy set a record. And I think Saquon is on board with that as well. We've seen that from him in the past, turning down records to make sure other guys shine as well. Having said that, that will be it for today's episode. We'll be back hopefully on Thursday, late Thursday, with the preview episode. It may come out Friday just with families in town for the holidays. But Merry Christmas to everyone that celebrates. Happy holidays to everyone else. And make sure to like, subscribe, and spread the word. And until next time, go Birds.